Hello Reapers, my name's Seth and we are back in with some more Trove. Today we're going to be talking about some very, very exciting questions that the developers ended up getting asked in their last live stream. However, a lot of these questions and a lot of the content that they talk about is kind of a long-term goal and not necessarily specifically related to 2018. They do kind of drop hints about the update that's going to end up happening in March, but we'll talk about that as we end up getting to the question. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to Shirokiri because that dude or dudette is an absolute baller. They just keep on watching the streams and summarizing all of the big questions that the developers end up getting asked, which makes it a very, very easy format for me to end up reporting on all of this stuff, right? So I'm going to put a link in the description to the original forum post if you want to read through all of this stuff yourselves, but without further ado, let's get right to it. And before we do, I would appreciate if you would hit that like button, makes the video show up in searches and stuff so that more people can understand and see all of this stuff that we're talking about with the current events and everything, right? So what is the estimated time of arrival on acid fishing? It was the question. And the developers say there are two phases to this question. Phase 1, there's no acid fishing. And phase 2, that was the last phase. So I guess in that regard, they answered directly by saying that they have no plans whatsoever by adding acid fishing, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to happen in the future, just because that's kind of what happens with Trove. There's lots of things that the developers say that they're going to do or they're not going to do, and then they just end up doing it or not doing it anyway. So I'm just going to say it's up in the air, but thankfully it means that we are at least not going to get acid fishing for 2018 or maybe not even in 2019. I would hope that they don't even bother with it because honestly, we don't need more fishing. This is really exciting though. Will there ever be an infinite survival mode? Now, this is something that we've actually talked about not only in the comment section, but in my videos and stuff like that, and also especially in my Discord, even back before Discord when we had Razor comms and stuff. This is years old, where we've actually talked about the idea that Shadow Towers should be more of a survival, infinite wave type of thing, where as you fight more and more waves, you end up getting better and better rewards, right? It's just very standard. Most games have it, but Trove for some reason doesn't. And I have always thought that that would be a lot better for the Shadow Tower design rather than the system that we have right now. Now, their answer has nothing to do with the Shadow Towers. They're actually talking about something separate where they say, we actually do have a design concept theorizing how this would work for Trove. It's referred to as at the moment as the Shadow Labyrinth. Our goal is to start working on it this year, which doesn't necessarily mean it's coming out this year. It means that they're working on it this year. The idea is waves of enemies, and the longer you last, the better rewards you get. That would be awesome. I think that would be something that Trove desperately needs. Potentially, we could see it giving, you know, I don't know, like what are they going to end up doing? I could see if they ended up taking influence from Diablo 3, where you would end up getting to higher and higher tiers, and maybe you get this item or an ability to level up your gear or augment your character somehow to end up being that much stronger as a reward for actually being strong enough to get to those higher tiers, and potentially could see a whole new end game to Trove if they ended up developing it properly. But, I mean, honestly speaking, at the same time, I'm kind of worried that they might end up just going the simple route and just adding a couple dragons and mounts that we'd be able to get out of the system, and that would be another dead thing, right? But hopefully it ends up getting executed properly. Again, though, this is not even in the works yet. They just kind of have the idea planned. So, rubber banding issues. What are the resolve plans? So, they kind of have a lengthy explanation why they're not really going to be able to 100% effectively reduce rubber banding and lag and issues with the servers and stuff like that. A lot of my own theorizing behind the scenes is that Trove in itself, the game engine, is very, very old and dated software. When the original concept of Trove was being developed, which was pretty much a carbon copy of Cube World, it was capitalizing on it, on the popularity of an open voxel game like that. Not to mention Cube World came from Minecraft, but more focused on adventuring, right? In any case, Trion Worlds, or whoever the CEO is over there, thought that Trove was going to be a flop. They didn't think that a open world voxel MMO was going to be successful, and because of it they said, okay, you can make this project but make it cheap. So unfortunately now we're starting to see the limitations of that a few years down the line, where Trove's game engine, I think, is a lot to blame for the actual servers, because it's got to do with the stability of the game engine itself, communicating and pinging between the servers that they actually have hosting the game. And, I mean, that's just my 2 cents towards it, why I don't think that there's any possible way that they could make the servers more stable than they are right now. which is a bad thing, because anytime any of these big updates end up coming out, we get a slew of new players coming into the game, or even just returning players, and then the servers just, they go down the toilet, you can't even play the game. So they got a longer explanation, pretty much saying the same thing that I just did for the most part, so you can read that out if you want. But this is really interesting. A rework for the Boomeranger. Is it finalized? Now, this is really, really interesting. I love the fact that we've been able to do these weekly videos, because I feel in a lot of ways it's actually been reflecting on the questions that the developers have been asked in their recent live streams. So this one more specifically, I'm not trying to say that I'm taking credit for this by any means. I'm just saying that I think, you know, either somebody watched a video or somebody started talking about with a friend and then watched a video or something, or rather, we've been talking about this for quite some time, where we've talked about how the Boomeranger was the last class that was confirmed by the developers to be worked on and getting a rework. Now, they actually respond and say there are no plans to adjust the Boomeranger. The next big change is coming to the Dracolite. So, hashtag confirmed, the Draco is the class that's getting the rework. They haven't even touched the Boomeranger. Now, it's not that the Boomeranger needs nearly as much work as the Draco, but it was something that we were excited about because the developers promised one thing and they're delivering another. So this is a very prime example to show you that just because they say it doesn't mean that it's actually set in stone. Because they did actually say that they were going to be reworking the Boomeranger and then they were going to be working the Draco. Now they just skipped right over to the Draco, which is perfectly fine because the Draco needs a lot more work than the Boomer does, honestly speaking. What is the verdict on Luxeon and Chaos Chest tradable loot? So this is very interesting. The developers respond and say, there is a good chance of us giving him, Luxeon, the Flux Dragon, tradable stuff. So give us feedback on what you guys feel would be beneficial to add. Future loot tables will be retooled, and the rewards that are hitting kind of in the later half of the year are going to end up being a lot more impressive rather than the ones that they already have set up for the first few months. So they actually have a forum post. I'm going to try and track it down and hopefully put it in the description, where they're actually asking for feedback on Luxeon, which it's about time they started getting feedback on that instead of just sitting there thinking that they already had the best solution, because Luxeon, as we've already discussed, is complete waste of potential. Any information on when you will drop any information on when you will drop information on the new gear / gem rarity. So this is kind of interesting, the response to this, and you know, it doesn't exactly say that they're not going to end up upgrading the gems to another tier, but it does say that they're going to probably do it in a different way. So what their response is that it's too early to talk about this stuff, meaning that it's probably going to be either the middle of the year or the last update of the year. What can be said isn't much. It won't be just another, oh, we're adding a new tier of gems, a seismic shift, a major change. Don't worry about your gems being too high level though, everybody. It's some of that, but much more. So in other words, that kind of, to me, confirms the fact that they are planning to up our gems to a higher tier, but it's going to be something different than what we've seen thus far. And now, again, you know, this kind of gets an exciting feeling in your stomach where you're thinking, oh, are they going to make it so that we could upgrade our stellar gems potentially to the new tier or something like that? Or what's going to end up happening with the next gear? You know, the developers kind of, from what I heard, they kind of understand and know that upgrading the gems would be a very big mistake because lots of people would be really, really frustrated and a lot of the customer base would end up quitting, right? However, the way that they've worded it could very well even mean, like where they say that, you know, they're going to end up adding a new tier of gems. Essentially, that's kind of what they say here, but it's going to end up being some of that with so much more added upon it. Now, this is where I immediately think that, okay, so you're just going to end up adding U10 and it's going to be something different than we've seen thus far. And that's where we're going to get the new gems. So technically speaking, it's going to be different than what we've seen thus far. But that's just, again, that's just my own personal opinion to it, folks. We don't know how the gems are going to be implemented. But again, while it seemed like they were trying to kind of dodge the question again, which rightly so, they're trying to dodge it because they don't want to give too many spoilers to all of the new info. But granted, if we're reading between the lines here, I would say that it's very, very probable that they are going to end up adding a new tier of gems. But how that's going to be executed remains to be seen. Are we going to actually straight up be able to level our stellar gems up into a new tier? Another idea that I thought would be really interesting is if that Shadow Labyrinth, which hashtag confirmed is not coming for 2018, but if it was coming for 2018, I thought that would be really interesting, as if you would get to higher tiers in the Labyrinth, and the reward that you could get is to augment one of your gems to an ascended level or something over stellar. That I could see as a really good reward, because honestly speaking, if we're going to talk about the gems a little bit here, I just want to say that personally speaking, I think that they really should stop focusing on the gem system. How it is right now is already okay. It does need rebalancing, which we got in our question that answers just that in 2 seconds. But I do think that the developers constantly are at ends with trying to add new stuff to the game for players to pay for, rather than realizing they've already got enough pay to win in this game, and they should start focusing on content. You know, like, never mind adding some more gems and stuff that's going to end up having us get more gem augmenters and stuff like that. Instead, can you please just focus on like the Shadow Labyrinth idea or the new class? Where's that? Are they even talking about the new class in 2018? Are there even plans for a new class in 2018? Hopefully that question ends up getting answered sometime next week, but until then, we've already seen a couple streams for 2018 that haven't actually answered anything about the new class outside of the fact that they're working on it, which doesn't even necessarily confirm it's 2018. So anyways, we got this right here. So can we expect gem augmentation costs to be reduced? So I'm going to have a separate video that's going to talk about this in a little bit more detail, just so that people can kind of focus on the fact that you shouldn't be augmenting your gems right now. Don't augment them. It's a waste of money, a waste of effort, a waste of time, because they say that flux costs are definitely going to be reduced, and we'll have a new method to obtain augmenting and rerolls at a greater role in the next major update. So that means that not the February hotfix that's coming out for the Adventurine and everything like that. We're going to see the update that's planned for March is going to end up seeing a big change to the gem system and the augmenting and rerolling. And I wouldn't even really say it's going to be that big of a change, outside of the fact that they're going to be changing a lot of the numbers and making it a lot easier to obtain rerollers and gem augmenting items. So again, save your augmenters, save your flux, folks. Don't even bother augmenting your gems right now. Could stellar gear level be changed to 20 to smooth out early game progression? We won't be making any adjustments to the way that works. No plans at the moment. Now, there actually used to be an item once upon a time that I don't even think is in the game anymore, where you would be able to lower the level requirement for a piece of gear all the way to 0, or level 1, I guess I should say. So you would be able to do this to a set of gear and actually have a full set that you could just swap over to when a new class would come into the game or something like that. It would be level 1. You'd already be able to give it some stellar stuff. So I don't think that that's in the game anymore. Maybe it is. Let me actually check. Would that be in the more section? It was the Twinkling Tome. Maybe it's not actually in here anymore. Maybe in the style section. That wouldn't really make that much sense. Honestly speaking, I don't even remember, but whatever, that's okay. In any case, they're not planning to readjust any of the current stuff in the game outside of class rebalancing. So the next question is there any plans to add an ability to add a cornerstone to clubs? So the developers acknowledge the fact that this has been a long requested feature. Since I started playing this game, people have wanted this. And fun fact, folks, did you know that alpha clubs, like clubs that were created on the alpha code of the game, actually generated biomes that would have dungeons and enemies? There are still some clubs that actually have dungeons and enemies in the PC version of Trove, obviously not on console, and you can actually go into those worlds and start fighting enemies and stuff. So it's interesting to note that the mechanics are there to actually have enemies in a world as well, which I think could be the future of Trove if they ended up making it so that club worlds could end up developing their own quests and stuff like that, which of course would end up leading to exploits, so we'd have to be very careful about that. But I think that would be really interesting. Anyways, as far as the cornerstones are concerned, it's a very long-standing request, the developers say. The code that supports it in the open worlds is a bit more difficult to apply to a club world, as the permissions allow the player to own that specific part of the land. So, how exactly, like, how would that end up working as far as, like, would an architect be able to mess around with your cornerstone if it was in a biome that was able for an architect to end up augmenting, and changing and stuff? So That's where there's a little bit of a gray area here, but they hear the requests and they love the requests, and it's technically unlikely due to the game systems, but it possibly could end up being changed sometime in the future. So honestly speaking, it doesn't look like it's going to happen, which at this point, honestly, it's kind of null. Like, we don't even really need it. It was a cool idea back in the day, but now it's just been such a long time that by the time it would get added to the game, nobody would care, honestly speaking. So the next question is, are there any plans to add more slots to the marketplace? So their response is actually very interesting, where they say, we will likely want to revamp the marketplace service in the future, but there's no specific plans to just add more slots at the moment. I think that would be really cool if they ended up kind of augmenting. I just keep saying that word. That's like the buzzword for today, right? But if they ended up changing the market system and stuff like that to be a little bit better and a little bit more intuitive, I think that could be good, because as it stands right now, it's, you know, you can kind of end up just doing the whole like market manipulation very easily, so long as you know what you're doing and have the amount of flux that's actually needed to do it. I don't really know any of that stuff, but either way, the market already works for what it's supposed to do. I'm honestly surprised that they're even considering working on it further. Will there be a boot dragon? The developers just straight up say no, but mustaches are implied. So I don't know if that means that they're kind of hinting like, oh, yes, you know, maybe, or no, there's not going to be a boot dragon, and they're kind of trying to hint that there is going to be one. I don't know. A boot dragon would be really, really weird, honestly speaking. But I could see that as like a really cheap dragon, maybe like the noob dragon, where it would have like really low stats and kind of be stupid, and you would build it out of like old boots, and its head would be like an upside down boot with the lip of the boot like kind of animating and stuff. I could see that actually being really, really funny. And then they say, any plans to improve the summoning AI, so the AI of your summoned allies and stuff like that. They actually say that pet classes are designed to be simple in Trove. No, they're not designed to be simple. There's no AI in Trove whatsoever, devs. Don't kid yourselves. Next question. Will there be any plans for different variations of the dance pad music to be heard by other players, as long as the default music song is heard by other players for no, whatever. The devs just say it's a low priority. I completely agree. Who cares about dance pads at this point? Would it be possible, this is interesting, would it be possible to add a special companion to each class that could potentially level up, grow, and give stats/passive abilities? So this is interesting because the developers actually respond with, that's a super cool idea. There's plans to do something similar, just not based on class. So meaning that they possibly could end up having like an ally or some type of a secondary character that kind of comes with you in combat or something. Maybe it would end up just fighting with you. I would love to see mercenaries added to Trove. I think that would be fantastic, especially for some of the ideas that they've talked about in recent videos, you know, where we've mentioned about how they want to make U10 and the combat progression a lot more difficult so that it kind of forces multiplayer rather than just soloing things. But I think it would be really interesting if you could hire mercenaries to kind of outfit yourselves so that you weren't forced to play with other players. Not to say that you don't want to play with other people, but sometimes you just want to go it alone. You know what I mean? Guild Wars ended up doing something very nice with that, where in that game you could actually go out on adventures and you could hire a bunch of NPCs that would end up taking slots that could end up being replaced by other players. The trade-off was that these NPCs would end up being the same level as you, and obviously they're NPCs, so they wouldn't be as smart as having another player guarding your back, but they would follow you around, support you and stuff like that, and it was a lot of fun to just kind of be very, very lazy, rather than when you're with a crowd of people, it tends to get really, really fast and can be frustrating in sometimes, especially if you're just trying to chill out and just kind of grind stuff. You know, like when I'm doing Shadow Towers solitarily on my own, you know, I just kind of like hanging out, listening to music, doing Shadow Towers, trying to grind up some of my badges. And then as soon as I see other people join into my Shadow Towers and stuff, it's kind of like, oh, now I can't like walk away and go make some food or something because this other person's going to continue on in the dungeon, which, I mean, that, you know, is kind of going way off topic considering the fact that they just said that they do have plans to add some type of a companion to follow you around. But I just think that would be really, really cool to add mercenaries or something like that, wouldn't it? Or even just to have like a proper ally. Like the, you know, furthermore to that other question asking about summons AI, like the summons in this game suck. we're just gonna face facts right here and just say they're terrible, man. Like, they're not really exciting. They don't feel cool in any regard. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they despawn as well as get killed. So they have a time limit before they end up despawning, rather than, unfortunately, just sticking it out with you and kind of fighting and feeling like you actually have a companion with you and something that has meaning. Instead, you've got these little allies that aren't worth summoning because they die too quick. You know, like I just personally, when I see that idea about potentially adding a companion to the game, I just think immediately, I'm a gunslinger. I want a two-handed barbarian to join me and start, you know, running in and like pulling enemies towards it while I'm fighting things. Kind of a, you know, nice synergy between a companion and the character itself, which begs the question, why don't classes synergize like that instead, right? Because otherwise there's not really much of a point for it. But in any case, you know, you can leave your own discussions and stuff like that you want in the comment section down below, folks. I do think that this is really, really cool stuff that they've actually been talking about. And I think that it's awesome that people have been asking these questions. So hopefully next week we're going to end up seeing a whole bunch more questions on their live stream that we'll be able to recap on. And I'm going to make a separate video talking specifically about gem augmenting so that people don't have to siphon through this 20-minute video to learn that they shouldn't be spending any of their augmenters right now. In either case, thank you for watching, everybody. Very much appreciated. Don't forget to like, share, favorite, and subscribe for more daily content. That's also going to build up loyalty points to my merch store. Links are in the description for that, as always. And then if you want to go the extra mile, you can actually donate to me for absolutely free with Gawkbox. Check links in the description explaining how that works as well. Sayonara and stay epic, everybody.